My husband thought he could deceive me, then I exposed his secret affair. Sarah had always been the kind of woman who carried the weight of the world with a quiet grace. A small-town girl with simple dreams, she'd grown up believing that love was enough to weather any storm. Her life was modest, a worn but clean apartment on the outskirts of the city, a humble job at the local diner where she labored long hours to make ends meet, and evenings spent cooking simple meals while Michael, her husband, returned late from a job that barely brought enough money through the door. She had married Michael young, swept up by his charm and promises of a future filled with happiness, security, and respect. Even as hardships piled on, bills to pay, relatives to care for, the unending drudgery of daily life, Sarah held on tightly to the belief that her marriage was a sanctuary. But lately, that sanctuary felt more like a cage. Michael's once warm smiles had grown rare and practiced. The phone calls that once sparked his enthusiasm were now met with quick excuses, hushed tones, and hastily ending conversations. Sarah noticed the subtle changes, the way he would clench his jaw when she casually asked about his day, the little sigh he'd try to hide before stepping into another room, and the sudden secrecy surrounding his phone. He tucked his devices into hidden pockets or slipped them under piles of paperwork. No longer was there the openness she once treasured. Instead, there was a wall between them, growing taller and more impenetrable each day. Her heart sank every time she caught a glimpse of a suspicious glance or a furtive text on the screen, disappearing too fast for her to see. The other night, after a particularly exhausting day at work, she'd returned home to an empty apartment and a lingering silence that pressed against her chest. As she tidied the living room, her eyes caught a small beep from Michael's forgotten phone lying on the couch. Curiosity and unease tangled inside her, propelling her to glance at the screen. The message that flashed momentarily froze her blood, a string of words, affectionate and urgent, bookmarked by a name she didn't recognize. Her breath hitched, the room spinning oddly around her as shame, confusion, and anger gnawed at her chest. How had she been so blind? The woman was younger, the words suggested an intimacy that shattered every promise Michael had made. That evening felt endless, filled with silent tears she could not shed openly. When Michael returned, his failure to meet her eyes spoke louder than any apology. The meals she prepared remained untouched, the usual warmth of their shared space was replaced by icy avoidance. She found herself shrinking beneath the weight of her isolation, the painful knowledge that the man she trusted was weaving a secret life just steps away from her. Yet, despite the humiliation settling over her like a heavy fog, Sarah refused to let it consume her entirely. Somewhere beyond the sting, a small ember of resolve flickered, reminding her that she was more than the shadows of betrayal cast upon her. Her neighbors, simple folk who saw her as kind but unremarkable, had never imagined the storm lurking beneath her quiet demeanor. They exchanged sidelong glances when Michael disappeared at odd hours, whispers stained with judgment fluttering through the air like autumn leaves. Sarah felt their eyes when she walked past the local market, some sympathetic, some suspicious. She was the woman whose husband worked late, yet left behind unanswered questions. The humiliated ache of being watched without knowing what was truly spoken in hushed tones was almost unbearable, yet Sarah bore it with the stoicism she had cultivated through years of hardship. This was her life's harshest test yet, and even though her heart ached, she held on to the fragile hope that the truth would somehow set her free. Sometimes, late at night, she caught herself staring into the darkness beyond their small window, tracing distant shapes where dreams might hide. What would you do if you uncovered a betrayal that pierced the soul? She'd wonder silently, not knowing the answer but sensing answers would have to come soon. She thought of the life she wanted, the dignity she deserved, and felt tears welling up again, a raw reminder that she wasn't just a victim of circumstances. She was Sarah, a woman who deserved more than whispered lies and empty promises. And although she was uncertain how the days ahead would unfold, a quiet urge whispered that she needed to stand, not just for herself, but for all the times she had been overlooked, underestimated, even forgotten. Have you ever felt that gut-wrenching sting of realizing someone you loved was keeping a secret from you? It's a pain few talk about openly, yet it touches so many lives in silence. Just like Sarah, sometimes the hardest part is knowing how to face that pain without losing yourself completely. Days passed after that fateful discovery, each one heavier than the last, as Sarah's mind wrestled with the truth she had uncovered. The secret messages weren't just an isolated slip, they were the tip of a hidden iceberg, one she wasn't sure she was ready to confront. Michael's behavior grew more distant, colder even, as if he sensed the growing chasm between them yet refused to acknowledge it. He tiptoed around her, avoiding shared meals and steering conversations to safe but meaningless topics. His eyes, once so full of warmth, now darted nervously at every glance she cast his way. Sarah felt the relentless weight of suspicion pressing down on her chest, making each breath shallow and tiring. One afternoon, at a small family gathering held awkwardly at her sister's home, the tension between Sarah and Michael was palpable. Their quiet argument simmered just below the surface, invisible to the others but glaringly clear to those who knew where to look. As the laughter of cousins and the hum of small talk filled the living room, Sarah's pulse quickened when Michael's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. For a fleeting moment, temptation tore through her. She wanted nothing more than to snatch that device, uncover every secret it held, and confront him then and there. But her hesitation betrayed her. She refrained, fearing the spectacle that could explode in front of everyone. Yet fate seems cruel in its designs. With a careless hand, Michael's phone slipped from the counter, its screen lighting up with a message preview so vivid no one could ignore it. * Can't wait to see you tonight, my love. * The room fell eerily silent. Eyes turned in confusion, whispers started forming unspoken questions. Sarah's heart hammered violently as all eyes locked on her, silently demanding an explanation she was too stunned to deliver. Michael's face went pale, shifting from false denial to visible panic. "It's nothing," he muttered weakly, but the dam had broken. The laughter ceased, replaced by a chilling tension that swallowed the gathering whole. The pain was blinding. Sarah's world cracked open around her, exposing every tender hope to the merciless gaze of friends and family. She felt like a wilted flower stranded at the center of a storm, helpless and raw. There were stiff exchanges of glances, some offered pity, others judgment dressed thinly as concern. The whispered questions she had dreaded now floated between the walls, making her skin crawl. "Why didn't you say something before?" an uncle asked quietly, as if seeking to place blame. "I thought you knew," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking like brittle glass. But no one truly knew the depths of her suffering, nor the years of silent struggle behind her humble smile. That evening, alone in the dim light of their apartment, Sarah sat curled beneath a thin blanket, replaying every moment in her mind. Tears washed over her cheeks, hot and unbidden, a stinging reminder that love betrayed carries a weight like no other. But beneath the sorrow, a raw thread of fire began to flicker. Was she destined to remain silent, swallowed by shame? Or could she find the strength to reclaim herself, to rise from this rubble? In the quiet, she resolved not to allow humiliation to define her story, even as the bitter taste of betrayal clung to her tongue like poison. Michael's betrayal wasn't just a private wound, it was a public spectacle that exposed her vulnerabilities to everyone she cared about. Each glance from a neighbor, every whispered comment at the grocery store, felt like needles pricking her already raw soul. And yet, Sarah sensed that beneath the judgment, beneath the sting of exposure, there was a deeper conversation waiting, one about truth, dignity, and the courage to confront even the harshest realities. Was it possible that the very humiliation meant to break her could instead become the catalyst for her awakening? Have you ever been caught in a moment where shame seemed to eclipse hope, and the faces around you whispered louder than your beating heart? It's in these moments that we must ask ourselves, will we succumb to the weight of others' eyes, or will we find a way to stand tall, even when the ground feels like it's crumbling beneath us? Sarah was just beginning to understand that battle. Sarah's days that followed felt like walking through a fog so thick it dulled every sound, every color, every hope she once held. Each morning when she awoke, the weight of Michael's betrayal pressed on her chest like a stone, making it hard to breathe. The whispers from the family gathering echoed endlessly in her mind, the stolen glances, the quick exchanges of pity or harsh judgment, reminding her that she was not only betrayed but now publicly humiliated. She found herself shrinking into the small spaces of her apartment, reluctant to face the world outside. The mirror became her enemy, reflecting a woman she no longer recognized, faded eyes, trembling lips, and a silence that ate away at her confidence. Where had the hopeful girl gone, one who believed love could conquer all? Had she ever truly existed? Michael, meanwhile, slipped further from her reach. Attempts at conversation were met with cold dismissal or defensive deflections. He avoided any meaningful exchange, as if retreating behind invisible walls. Sarah tried to understand, was this fear, guilt, or just indifference? Every question plunged her deeper into solitude. The man she had trusted completely became a stranger who haunted her nights and fled her touch. Sometimes, she wondered if she had failed somehow, if her love had been insufficient, or if pride kept her blind to signs she had missed. Yet, despite the bitter ache nestled within, a spark of resilience fought to ignite. She was not ready to give in, not to despair, not to the humiliations sown around her. One afternoon, while sorting through worn photographs in a dusty box, Sarah's trembling fingers brushed a note tucked inside, a scribbled message from a friend she hadn't seen in years. It spoke of believing in herself and reclaiming the light even in the darkest moments. That small reminder breathed fresh life into her spirit. Later, while gathering courage to step outside, she ran into Mrs. Jensen, an elderly neighbor known for her quiet strength and gentle wisdom. Mrs. Jensen paused as Sarah passed by, eyes softening with a knowing glance. "You're stronger than you know, dear," she said simply, her voice a balm to Sarah's frayed nerves. It was a fleeting moment of kindness yet a monumental shift for Sarah. In that simple encounter, she glimpsed the possibility of allies amid the chaos. Encouraged but still fragile, Sarah began to open up to a trusted coworker at the diner, Maya, a woman who had faced her own battles and emerged stronger. Their conversations, once casual, deepened into a lifeline. Maya's patient listening, the absence of judgment, and the quiet affirmations she offered helped Sarah confront her tangled emotions. Slowly, she started piecing together fractured parts of herself, understanding that healing was neither quick nor linear but necessary. Yet, just as hope rekindled, new obstacles appeared. Michael's increasing erratic behavior cast shadows over her fragile progress, secretive phone calls grew more frequent, and his tired excuses multiplied. It became clear he was still trying to keep his other life hidden, prolonging the torment and uncertainty. One chilling evening, Sarah caught a glimpse of a text message on Michael's phone, a fleeting notification she almost missed. "Can we meet? It's urgent." Fear and fury roared within her. Should she confront him? Gather proof? Or retreat into quiet despair again? Her anxiety swirled with desperation as she wrestled with next steps. Alone in the dim room, surrounded by the echoes of betrayal, she realized she was at a crossroads. Would she remain a silent victim, crushed beneath the weight of humiliation and secrecy? Or would she summon the courage to face the coming storm, whatever it might bring? The answer began surfacing, a fragile but fierce determination to reclaim control of her life. Have you ever felt that paralyzing mix of hurt and hope, unsure if you'll stumble or rise? Moments like these, whether in relationships, work, or life's trials, define us. Like Sarah, many must choose between retreat and resilience. What would you do when placed on that knife's edge? When every step forward tastes like ash, yet turning back feels impossible? Sometimes, the first act of courage is simply to stand, inhale the pain, and decide to move toward the light, even when all you can see are shadows. The night arrived heavy and unyielding, wrapping Sarah in a suffocating silence that mirrored the turmoil within her soul. Michael had left early that evening, muttering vague excuses about work demands she'd heard too many times to believe anymore. The apartment felt colder without his presence, though it was filled with an uneasy tension, as if the walls themselves whispered ominous secrets. Sarah sat alone on their worn sofa, clutching her phone with trembling fingers, staring at the texts she discovered, the undeniable proof of his ongoing affair with the younger woman. Each message burned like acid on her heart, a cruel reminder that the deception was far from over. Her mind raced, caught between rage, despair, and a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this nightmare without completely shattering under its weight. She felt the familiar sting of tears but refused to let them fall yet. Instead, she gathered every ounce of strength left within, determined that this time, she would not be invisible, not a silent sufferer hidden behind closed doors. She dialed a number she'd barely used before, the number of a counselor recommended by Maya, the only person who had ever seen past Sarah's quiet facade and believed in her resilience. The voice on the other end was warm, steady, and unexpectedly grounding. For the first time in months, Sarah allowed herself a breath of relief, a flicker of hope amid the darkness. Days later, something unexpected happened. Michael's secret world began unraveling openly. During an unexpected gathering at a mutual friend's house, where Sarah faced the nervous eyes of acquaintances who had long whispered behind her back, the young woman showed up unannounced. The room froze in shock when she entered, her confident smile standing in sharp contrast to Sarah's tense composure. Whispers turned into rumors, and then into blunt words exchanged across the crowded space. The young woman's audacity to appear openly, unapologetic and unmasked, sparked a reckoning no one anticipated. Eyes that once pitted Sarah now scrutinized Michael with equal measure. His facade cracked visibly, the charm and confidence replaced by awkward stammering and desperate denials. In that moment, Sarah experienced the strangest blend of humiliation and vindication. The love she thought she'd lost had turned into a spectacle, but this spectacle opened doors she hadn't dared to unlock before. The crowd's focus shifted, not on her shame, but on the truth laid bare. The whispered rumors morphed into conversations calling for accountability, and people who had once looked away now questioned their own silence. Sarah stood amid the turmoil, her heart pounding fiercely, aware that this was the turning point where she could reclaim her narrative. The betrayal, once a suffocating prison, was now the fuel for her courage. Back at home, amidst the chaos of emotions, Sarah found unexpected allies. Maya stayed beside her, unwavering and strong, guiding her through legal consultations and emotional support groups. Mrs. Jensen became a steady presence too, a living reminder that strength could be found in the most unassuming places. Slowly, these connections wove a safety net beneath Sarah's faltering steps. More than that, they ignited a fire, a readiness to confront not only Michael but the pain that had threatened to engulf her. Sarah realized the power of voice, of standing in truth despite the vulnerability it entailed. Every conversation, every tear, every act of bravery chipped away at the humiliation that had threatened to define her. As news of the affair spread, the reactions of those around Sarah crystallized into lessons about human nature, the cruelty that thrives in secrecy, the compassion that blooms when truth emerges, and the complexity of forgiveness. Michael's world began to collapse, not just his marriage, but the carefully constructed image he'd presented to friends and family. Meanwhile, Sarah started envisioning a future no longer tethered to betrayal's shadow. Her resilience was no longer invisible. It shone like a beacon against the darkness, guiding her toward a life reclaimed in dignity and strength. Have you ever experienced a moment when the lowest point suddenly turns into a doorway to something new, something hopeful? Sarah's story teaches us that even in our darkest hours, unexpected acts of courage and kindness can illuminate the path forward. What doors might your pain be unlocking right now, if you dared to step through them? The journey might be painful, but it often leads to the most profound transformations. The confrontation came like a storm breaking after a long, suffocating drought. Sarah had spent weeks preparing herself, not just emotionally, but practically too, gathering evidence, consulting with friends, and bracing for the inevitable fallout. The moment had come when silence was no longer an option. At a community gathering, where whispers still lingered in the air and stolen looks were exchanged, Sarah stood tall, the weight of months of betrayal transformed into unwavering resolve. Eyes followed her every step as she approached Michael, who had been avoiding her gaze for weeks. The man who once seemed untouchable now appeared diminished under her steady stare, stripped of his false bravado. Her voice, though tinged with pain, carried a strength that silenced the murmurs. She spoke clearly, recounting the hidden truths that had fractured their lives, the texts, the lies, the nights spent away from home, the casual disregard for the vows they had once shared. Michael's face twisted from denial to shame, the mask finally slipping to reveal the man behind the facade. The crowd's reaction shifted from judgment cast upon Sarah to incredulous disbelief at his betrayal. Friends who had once questioned her now nodded slowly, their sympathy and respect realigning in her favor. It was a powerful moment, not just a public reckoning, but a personal victory against years of doubt and secrecy. The consequences for Michael were immediate and undeniable. His reputation crumbled in the eyes of the community and, more importantly, in the heartbreak of those he had betrayed. Invitations were rescinded, conversations stopped, and a cold distance replaced the warmth he once enjoyed. Yet Sarah did not revel in his downfall. Her strength lay not in revenge but in reclaiming her dignity and forging a new path. She stood not as a victim, but as a woman who had faced the abyss and chosen to rise. Long nights filled with tears had given way to mornings where she met her reflection with steady eyes. The journey had been brutal, the scars lingering, yet they bore witness to her unyielding courage. Amid the rubble of a broken marriage, Sarah discovered something profound, the power of self-worth unshaken by betrayal. Friends like Maya and Mrs. Jensen remained steadfast allies, offering support that was both practical and deeply nurturing. Sarah found solace in the routine of her work at the diner, in the quiet moments of reflection, and in the knowledge that she was slowly building a life untethered to deceit. Her community began to see her not as the woman who had been humiliated but as one who had reclaimed her story, inspiring quiet respect and newfound admiration. It was a transformation that no secret, no betrayal, could erase. Yet, the most remarkable change was the one within Sarah herself. She learned to forgive, not Michael, but the part of herself that had been unsure, scared, and willing to be silenced. Forgiveness became the foundation of her freedom, allowing her to move forward without bitterness consuming her heart. She embraced the lessons etched into her journey, that strength is often born from the deepest wounds, that vulnerability can be a fierce form of courage, and that the true measure of a woman is not in the hardships she faces, but in how she rises above them. The story she lived was no longer defined by a husband's deception, but by her own unyielding spirit. Have you ever found yourself at the edge of despair, only to discover that despair was the birthplace of your greatest strength? Sarah's journey challenges us all to face our struggles head-on, to seek justice not through vengeance but through integrity, and to remember that healing often begins with reclaiming our voice. In the midst of heartbreak, she found a resilience that spoke to the hearts of many. What strength lies within you, waiting to be uncovered when the world seems at its darkest? The answer might surprise you in the most beautiful way. Months after the storm of confrontation had passed, Sarah found herself standing in a place she had never imagined she could reach, peace. The scars of betrayal remained etched upon her spirit, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they had become silent teachers, lessons carved deep by hardship but softened by time and healing. Life in the small apartment, once heavy with tension and shadows, now felt warmer, filled with quiet light that came from within. She had learned how to nurture her own happiness, tending to her dreams with gentle hands and steady heart. The community that once viewed her with pity now greeted her with respect, their whispered doubts replaced by genuine admiration for the woman who had refused to be broken. Her relationship with Michael was over, not with rancor, but with finality. Sarah understood that some stories must close for new chapters to begin. She began volunteering at a local support group, offering comfort to others navigating the jagged edges of betrayal and heartache. Her journey had instilled in her a profound empathy, a desire to uplift those who felt silenced or lost. Through these efforts, Sarah found renewed purpose that transcended her own pain. She discovered that vulnerability shared could transform isolation into strength, and that courage was contagious. The friendships she forged in this new phase of life became a tapestry of resilience and hope, demonstrating the unbreakable bonds formed by shared struggle and healing. Looking back, Sarah often marveled at the transformation within herself. The woman who once doubted her worth now shone with a quiet confidence rooted not in perfection but authenticity. She loved deeply again, though cautiously, with wisdom gained from past wounds, and embraced the future with open arms. Her story became a beacon for many, a testament to the power of dignity over despair, of forgiveness over bitterness, and of self-love over self-doubt. Every day was a conscious choice to live fully, to honor her own journey, and to inspire others to do the same. In these moments, Sarah felt a tender gratitude for the painful chapters that had shaped her, knowing they had led her to this place of strength and peace. The greatest lesson Sarah carries with her is simple yet profound. True strength lies not in perfection or in the absence of pain, but in the grace to rise again when life knocks us down. Betrayal, though cruel and unmistakably painful, need not be the end of the story but the beginning of a powerful new narrative, one of hope, resilience, and profound personal growth. Her courage to confront the truth, to embrace pain, and ultimately to forgive herself and others has become a source of inspiration to all who hear her story. For those who feel crushed under the weight of humiliation or betrayal, Sarah's journey is a gentle reminder that healing is always possible and that the light within can never be extinguished. Have you ever thought about the strength you carry, sometimes hidden beneath layers of doubt and fear? Sarah's path shows us that when we choose to face our challenges with openness and courage, we not only rebuild ourselves, we also pave the way for others to find their own light. It's a call to believe in the power of resilience, to trust that even in the darkest moments, we possess the ability to rise, to forgive, and to heal. If you are standing where Sarah once stood, afraid, uncertain, wounded, remember this: your story is far from over, and the brightest chapters may still lie ahead. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. See you in our next story.